real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Nathan Romas with you. We are coming up to Remembrance Day, and I've got a number of guests lined up to talk about their service and sacrifice. We are going to talk about their experiences in training and deployments, the memories, the people, and impacts of service. To help me, I have co-host John Simpson here. John is a U.S. Army veteran with over 40 years of practical experience. He is an instructor with Snipercraft Incorporated and a research historian who has authored several books on the fundamentals and advanced tactics of marksmanship and sniper skills. Also, John was previously on this podcast in Season 2, Episodes 23 and 45. And for our guest today, we have another John here. And as I said at the start, we're going to use, or I'll use last names just to keep people straight. But we have John Larsen with us. John is a 30-year veteran of the U.S. Army. He enlisted in 1961 and originally trained as a traffic analyst in signals intelligence, or a SIGINT unit. He completed several tours or deployments throughout Asia. John later attended Ranger School and went to Vietnam for a one-year tour from 1967 to 68. He later married in 1970 before returning to Vietnam for another tour from 71 to 72 as part of the Border Ranger program. John later joined a scuba team, which are now known as combat dive teams, and he was promoted to team sergeant. He has been all over Asia and Europe for exercises and missions. He eventually retired at the rank of sergeant major. After the military, John wrote for a knife magazine for 20 years. He completed school and continued to instruct in various military capacities. And one special note, he deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan at some point to instruct, and he ended up spending some nights with the snipers from the 3rd Battalion, PPCLI of the Canadian Forces. So interesting little connection there. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And just for listeners, just so they know, we usually record this over Zoom. Mr. Larsen is calling in, so the audio might sound a little bit different. So I just wanted to let people know, but it's working, so we'll make it work, and hopefully it turns out really good. But yeah, thank you for joining us there, Larsen.
Well, again, thank you for letting me be here.
Maybe we'll just kind of jump into it because you got a lot of stuff, so I'm hoping we can get through most of it in the time that we have with you. Can you start us at the beginning and just tell us about yourself? Maybe something about family and you growing up as a kid.
I was born in North New Jersey, 6 February 1942, and we lived there till 1947. My father was a captain in the Merchant Marine, and in 47 he came ashore and became what they call a port captain. We moved to West Caldwell, New Jersey, where I grew up at the high school. Nothing extraordinary about my growing up. Spent 12 years in the same school district. Played a little football, did a little wrestling. That's about it. Nothing unusual, just an average growing up type thing. Then I spent one semester at George Washington University and decided that college wasn't for me. So I enlisted in the Army in 28 February 1961. Retired 28 February 1991. So, and in between that, I had 30 years and 4 days.
Okay. Well, maybe even just before we get into the Army stuff, though, so you did a bunch of team sports. Do you find, is that something that kind of, were you always kind of, driven in that direction to be involved in team sports?
No, not really. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say on a at least on a football team, you get used to working as a team, which helps you once you get into the service. You're used to functioning as a member of a team type deal. Wrestling is a kind of an individual sport, so not so much there. Although physically it helps you because you've got to be in shape. So, and so when I went to basic training, that was nothing I was not used to. Some people come in and they haven't really done anything outside of high school PT, and then it's quite traumatic for them. But it wasn't for me. So
Yeah, I find a lot of the skills translate though from sports into the military, especially the teamwork aspect, like you're saying. Obviously, the physicality. Uh, did you said your dad worked on ships? Did you have any family in military that had a history of being in the military?
it's strange because again, my father was a captain of merchant marine. He sailed all during World War II on various convoys to England. He was through the Red Sea. He was on the convoy that, quote, saved Malta. In fact, he got a medal and a certificate from the Maltese government here some years back. But everybody in my family, my mother's brother was in the Navy. His daughter was in the Navy. Almost everybody I knew was maritime. But I was always interested in the Army, so I guess I was the black sheep of the family type thing. So.
Well, what kind of drew you to that? Applying or drew you to the Army in general?
No, I know. I was always interested in military history, and I read a lot of books on the military, and junior and in high school. And a very good friend of mine, his father was a instructor RT instructor at Princeton College, and he lived in Caldwell, and I knew him and I respected him. Just something I was interested in doing. I had no real desire to spend any time on a ship. And what I see of, I've watched a lot of videos on the Navy since then, since I got out, and all the respect to them, but that's not something I would want to do.
So yeah, you end up going into the Army. What year did you apply there, and how old were you at that point?
See, I was, I guess, 19 when I went in, 28 February 1961.
Can you talk a bit about the process of applying even, and what did your family say? Did they have any opinions on this?
My father thought it was a good thing to do. I'm not sure what my mother thought about it, but in those days, and I don't know what it is now, you had to go down and take a pre-test to see if you qualified to take the big test. And that was done at the recruiting station in Newark. And once you passed the big test, depending on how you scored, they would tell you what military jobs were open for you based on your score. And I scored high, so I was able to go into the SIGINT part of the organization type thing. So
okay. So what once you get told your score and that you're eligible for this SIGINT unit, what's kind of the process from there?
Well, then you went off to basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey for 8 weeks, just like everybody who comes in the Army. And then once I got done with that, I moved up to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and went to kind of like a basic for SIGINT for 6 weeks, and then 12 or 14 weeks for my MOS, my military occupation specialty. Stayed there for a little bit longer as they were not, there was a freeze on sending people overseas at that particular time, which worked out to my benefit because when I was working as an assistant instructor, and when it came time for me to go, they said you have 3 choices, and one was Sinop, Turkey, one was up in the Aleutian Islands, and one was Okinawa in the Ryukyu Islands. And I chose Okinawa because I had heard about that. And I was very fortunate. I was one of the very first people to fly to Okinawa on a commercial jet, Northwest Orient Airlines. the military decided that when they shipped you by boat to Okinawa, it's basically a month. Then they ship you back another month. They pay you for 2 months to get no use out of you. So instead, I got to fly, and I ended up on Okinawa on 19 December 1961. Went to work. So
Wow.
much nicer than the troop ship.
Well, and without giving out any national secrets or getting yourself in trouble, can you tell us what is SIGINT, or Signals Intelligence? Can you kind of explain it for listeners?
Well, my specific job was a traffic analyst, and that's you analyze any of the communications outside of what's encrypted. You don't break any codes or anything like that. And that's about all I want to say.
All right. No, that works good. I don't want people thinking like, you're directing traffic or something to do with car collisions. So, no, explanation is good enough. Okay, so you go through all those weeks of training. Is there, like, you did basic training and then you go off for the signals training? Is the signal stuff, are you just around computers all day, or is there any other physical components to that training? Do they keep you on some kind of program, or no?
This was way before computers. It was not a single computer involved. Basically, you took lessons and you had practice SIGINT that you would have to analyze and decide what was going on type deal.
Okay.
But again, the only computer I remember when I finished my course was the old punch, the cards, big long machine, and they had
yeah.
I worked for that for a little bit. That was the closest computer we ever saw at that time. In fact, I don't think we got computers in the unit till I was back in Okinawa in probably about 1986, we got computers at the company level. And of course,
okay.
then everybody's got a computer.
So when you're in Okinawa, you go there in the early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys kind of doing things in prep for Vietnam? Like, is there stuff going on already, or is this you're just working on other things?
No, we were where I was at a place called Torrey Station. We did not have anything to do with Vietnam. We had a real world mission, but it did not include Vietnam at that time. So.
Okay. In your bio, you talk about being deployed to nationalist China, which is now Taiwan. I guess it's Taiwan to some people, and some people still say it's China. But can you talk a bit about just working in that region, what it was like, maybe some of the politics that are going on, that reasons why you might be there?
Well, again, in 1964, when I reenlisted to go to a signal intelligence unit that supported First Special Forces Group, which was part of SAF Asia, because we had engineers, military intelligence, civil affairs, and medical units all attached to the actual Special Forces unit. And I went to jump school on Okinawa, and then we deployed to Taiwan. We rode down island on a train to a place called Taichung. And it was interesting in that all the way down the coastline, there were pillboxes in kind of like a V formation, one forward and one on either side, a little further back. The whole 100 or so miles down the railroad track. And they were definitely prepared to, I think they were trained in to go back.
Okay.
We were based out of a place that had a staff college in it, and they had a band that played for their, just like any school type deal. And these poor guys, 3 days a week, we would see them camouflaged up, carrying 1903 Springfield rifles and ZB-26 light machine guns, and they would go to the field for 3 days. And I'm thinking, if this is a school band that goes to the field 3 days a week, what does the infantry do? You know, so and there's an airfield there, which we used to eat at the club because there was obviously no mess facilities for us there, and you could see. I want to say they were F-86s flown by the Chinese. They would take off and they had rockets on them. And when they would come back, there'd be no rockets. So you had a pretty good idea what they were doing. So politics, really didn't get involved in that too much, although I did ask one Chinese lady in a store, who was that policeman out there? And she just said something like, we have a lot of policemen. So they had a pretty hard, firm grasp on what was going on in the country. So
yeah,
I would say that they were, there's native-born Taiwanese and then there was Chinese. And I would say there was not a great bit of love lost between the two. When you would get captured in the field, you would be brought in, and then 8 hours later, you would be reinserted into the problem. The Chinese refused to go back into the hills at night. They would not do that because they were concerned about their the reception by the locals type thing. So, but that's all. Not big thing.
Okay. And one of the things I'm wondering too, you were saying so you're in SIGINT and then you're going to jump school. Like, are you looking to get out of, I guess, the inside work? You want to get out into the field? Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. My goal was to work my way into regular special forces because we were attached. We were required to be special forces qualified. We had to, we were supposed to be deploying with teams, and you need to be able to function in the field with them, which is what, again, that was next time we went to Korea, took Suri, and jumped in with the team. In fact, they had several of the patch units in South Asia were deployed with the teams to see which one, if any, would initially deploy with an A team. And of the medics, the PSYOPs, engineers, the 441st Military Intelligence, and my unit, the 400th ASA SOD, we were the only ones that they said we would initially deploy with because of the intelligence we were able to provide them.
So you go off to jump school from there. Was it a hard transition? Were they okay with you just saying like, hey, I did all this specialized training. Now I want to go do something else?
I had to re-enlist, and I was still within the SIGINT field, so that that was not a problem. I re-enlisted at Torrey Station, and basically I just moved down the island to Machinata, where we had our base at, and went to jump school from there at Camp Sukaran. So they had a airborne facility there with the jump towers, and the swing landing trainers, and all the stuff. And then we jumped out on Yomadan Drop Zone, which was an old Japanese airfield. Which, if you look at on the Battle of Okinawa, when they landed directly below that and moved up. Then it was called Yonatan. I don't know why they changed it to Yonatan. I don't know. But,
okay.
So, the island's only 67 miles by 15. So.
Oh, John, when you went through jump training, what planes were you jumping out of at that time?
All of our jumps for jump school were C-130s for the school. And then right after that, I did my cherry jump. And that was out of the old Flying Banana H-21 helicopter, which was, when we made our jump, then it was at least 11 years old, if it was the last one ever produced. And they really struggled to get up into the air. So
you're jumping out of that plane one way or another.
Yeah.
So old.
Yeah. In fact, I remember we went out and jumped in Yomaton, and there's an anchor line cable that you hook your parachute into on the floor. And for some reason, this guy, instead of hooking into the cable, he hooked into the D-ring at the rear of the aircraft, which supported the cable. So by the time he got up to the front and the door, his static line was completely deployed.
Yep.
So when he jumped out, the parachute immediately deployed and got caught on the rear wheel of the H-21. Well, he's signaling he wants to be cut loose and he's going to descend on his reserve. Well, they're not doing that, because then the parachute will go up into the rotors and they'll crash. So they are slowly coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully he will not bounce off at, say, 200 feet, because then he won't have time to deploy a chute. So they slowly land, and then everybody has to run over and grab his parachute again so it doesn't billow up into the rotors. So that was quite exciting for him. So
That's why I don't jump out of planes. I've never been interested in it.
Well, I had actually, when I was at Fort Devens, a high school friend of mine, his older brother had re-enlisted and was also going to the course there. And he got me interested in sports parachuting. We went out to Orange, Massachusetts, which at that time was a big sports parachuting center. I was trying to do it, but since I was under 21, they required a notarized letter from my parents, believe it or not, that it was okay for me to take the training. My father was at sea, and my mother said, if the Army wants you to go to parachute school, they'll send you. I said no. So it took me another 3 years, but I did get to go. So anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you end up leaving, do your jump school, and where do you kind of go from there?
Again, I stayed there. We did went to Taiwan, and then later in like November '64, went to Korea for the exercise, and then in late March, in March of '65, we had sent 6 people down to a large SIGINT facility up in a place called Fubai, which was north of Da Nang. And there were like 800 Americans there. It had gone from it being about a 50-man unit to like 800. And interestingly enough, they lived in trailers. They were made in Canada. And they would take 2 trailers, one on left and right. And there's I'm talking about probably 100 meters long. They had a roof between the 2, and you walk down the center with air conditioned, wood paneling, artificial, very, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then they brought RMK in, and they built all sorts of trenches and pillboxes and stuff like that. We sent 6 people down to train them on the M14, M60, 50 caliber machine gun, M29, 81 millimeter mortar, and the M113 armored personnel carrier. A lot of people in this SIGINT unit that I got to that supported special forces had previously been in infantry or armor, and then had come into the ASA, so they had the background skills for that. I kind of learned on the way. I showed up as a replacement. I'd never been in an APC, and 2 days later, I was the track commander. So,
Wow.
And I taught the 50 caliber machine gun and the M14. So we stayed there for, I guess I was there for about 6 weeks. And then the Marines showed up, the United States Marine Corps showed up at Da Nang, and then came up and deployed at the airfield. That's the only place, people talk about this, but the only time it ever happened to me, we had, of course, Vietnamese workers there. And I was talking to one of them, and he said, tomorrow, beaucoup Marines come. And I had no clue about this happening. The next day, we were out there training, and all these Marine H-34 helicopters show up, and a Marine battalion showed up. And then, since they were there and pushed out, conducting offensive operations. Our mission was over, and we went down to 3 Corps and started working on another mission.
Okay.
And then when I got done with that 6 months, when I came back to Okinawa, my post-deployment physical said I had tuberculosis, and I ended up spending 11 months at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, wow. So you can't come all the way back. You're in the hospital, and I obviously have a severe case of that if you're in there for that long.
I was not, I won't say I was that severe. I didn't have to get an operation. I just took 22 pills a day for 20 months and 9 days. But
wow,
it just takes a long time to where you get to be non-contagious and so forth, and then you're able to. We lived in a ward that had been built for World War One because a lot of people came back with tuberculosis. We wore they weren't pajamas because they were thick material, kind of like a Toreador jacket and trousers, and ours were purple. Everybody else wore blue. And when we had to go to the main hospital for anything, we had to wear a green mask, much like we did for COVID type thing. So it was almost like having a leper bell. They see you, they kind of step aside. There's something wrong with those guys.
That must have been killing you though, because you're sitting there and you're early in your career. You just gone through all this training. You're looking to get after it, and then you're kind of on the bench now, right?
Well, when I was in the hospital for about maybe a week on Okinawa before I went back, they said, "Oh, you'll be back there 6 to 8 weeks, and then you can go off and do other things." And I said, "Well, I can get some schools out of the way and so forth." And I get back there and I talked to the actual doctor at the Ward 502, and they said, "What'd they tell you?" And I told them what they said. He said, "Well, kind of wrong. You're going to be here from 12 to 18 months. What?" And you will have a permanent profile of 2, which means I won't be able to do anything that I wanted to do. But I got out of there in 11 months because I did what they told me. I wasn't that sick, and I worked very hard at being staying physical. We went to the gym 3 times a week, and then we bowled twice a week. So that, they kept you moving.
Yeah.
What SF? I'm trying to think of the name because when I was over at the gym with PT, and the medic giving it was a World War II medic, sergeant first class, and he started doing push-ups, and we did 20 push-ups, and he kept going, so I kept going. And I just had his name and lost it. Anyway, he hurt his back, and he told me, "You maybe hurt my back, so you have to give PT from now on." So the rest of the time I was there, 3 times a week, I led PT. And then I would use the weights, and I said, "I'd like to take some weights back to the ward so I can do it on the days I'm not here." And the only one they had that they had 2 sets of was 40-pound dumbbells. So I had to work up till I could do what I needed to do with 40-pound dumbbells, and then I took them back to the ward. So again, when I had no endurance per se, but physically I was not as bad as a lot of people. So,
okay.
I didn't need to get operated on. A lot of people, they would go in there, basically split the rib cage. Your lung is kind of like an orange, and they would take out a segment or 2 segments of your lung and sew you back up type deal. If you were fortunate, I know at least 2 people that they opened up and then just closed them back up because they had, in addition to the tuberculosis, they had cancer, and there was basically nothing they could do for them. So.
Oh wow!
TB was still the number 3 killer in the United States at that time, probably in Canada too.
Mm-hmm. So you're there, you're kind of working through that stuff. Do you have is there anything that really keeps you going, or what's your main motivator for getting back to the military? Is it just you know this is kind of a calling, you want to be there? Or is anyone pushing you along the way? Is there anyone that kind of stands out as a motivator for you?
No, it again was pretty much what I wanted to do. And one of the things I had noted my first 3 years when I was at Torrey Station was I saw numerous people who would get out of the Army and say, "I'm never coming back in. You couldn't pay me to come back in." And in those days, and for quite a while, you could get out of the Army, and as long as you came back in less than 90 days, you would keep your rank that you had when you got out. I don't know how many people I saw in Okinawa that would swear up and down they would never, ever, ever come back.
Mm-hmm.
And then 60, 70, 80 days later, they would be back. I made up my mind, if I'm going to stay in, I'm going to stay in until I retire. And I liked what I was doing. And that was my motivation to stay as healthy as I could. And as soon as I could, get back to Special Forces.
So, you end up obviously getting better, healing up.
Mm-hmm.
And is it right after that you end up going to Ranger School? Is that kind of the next progression?
No, I left Fitzsimmons Hospital and I went to Fort Bragg to the 403rd SOD, which was getting ready to go to Vietnam. The whole unit was transferring. While I was waiting for my orders, apparently a clerk, my orders had come in, that clerk was on leave. Nobody did anything, and I was kind of lost in the shuffle. So when I showed up at Fort Bragg, they're all going, "What are you doing here?" "What do you mean?" "I got orders." I said, "Yeah, well, you didn't come so long. We thought you had been sent someplace else."
Oh.
Well, I could not deploy because I was still under a medical hold. I was still taking medication. So they said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I don't know." So I ended up going to Fort Meade, Maryland, to a 6-month course that run by NSA, which was academically the hardest course I've ever been to, including college.
Mm-hmm.
College was nothing compared to this course. Then when I had orders to return to Special Forces upon the completion of the school. Well, I get ready to finish the school, I get orders to go back to that same Fubai field station that I'd been at as an instructor. And the last thing I wanted to do was go back to being in the field station. I said, "What the hell?" I went down to personnel. I said, "Look, I'm supposed to go back to Special Forces." They said, "Yes, but they don't need any replacements right now." So I always wanted to go to Ranger School. I figured that would give me enough time with leave that I would eat up those 3 months. So then I went and applied to go to Ranger School, and they said, "Well, you can't go because your profile is a P2 under your lungs."
Mm-hmm.
So I went over and saw a doctor, and I said, "Hey, what they told me at this hospital was that I would be P1 after 18 months. I would be back to be able to do anything I wanted to do." And the doctor said, "Well, you're wrong." I said, No, I'm not wrong. I'm telling Lieutenant Colonel Doctor, who's been doing this for 25 years, that he's wrong." So he shows me the regulation, and guess what? I was wrong. The only thing that saved me was that his nurse had been on my ward at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital. She had got orders for Vietnam, and I think I was the only person there that had been to Vietnam. And I sat down with her for about 2 hours and explained to her what she would possibly see in Vietnam. She told the doctor, "Yes, that's what they tell us when we were at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital." Thank God the doctor called the head of the TB ward. They talked. I still have a copy of it. It said, due to this man's requirement, to kind of fudge that a little bit, that I had to go to Ranger School. We are changing his profile to P1 based on the fact that the Fitzsimmons Army Hospital put a change into the regulation to reflect this. So I was able to go, and I just said maybe I should continue to take my medication while I was down there. So I had about a month prepare. And I found my parents had gone to Europe on a vacation. I got to use the car, and I drove all around Fort Meade. It was 13 miles, and I borrowed a rucksack and 75 pounds of weights. I would walk around that 13 miles 3 times a week, faster and faster and faster. So when I got to Ranger School, I had no problems with long marches type deal. And then on other days, I would do what they used to call the daily dozen, which was the PT we did and run type thing. So then I would carry, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the military, we have a little, maybe 3-inch tall, little plastic round tubes that you get your medication in. And I got about 10 of those. And if we were going out for 7 days in Ranger School, I would make up 8 of those and then tape them and then put them in my butt pack type thing.
Oh,
and then every day I would take my medication.
Yeah.
And that was fine until we got to Florida about 4 or 5 days before we graduated. And I was out on an outpost, and I was taking my medication, and a shadow appeared behind me, and it was one of the Ranger cadre, a captain. And he said, "What are you taking?" I said, "I'm taking my medication." He said, "What for?" I said, "For tuberculosis." But you can't go to medical Ranger School with TB. I mean, I was non-contagious at that time. This was more of a preventive thing, so it didn't come back.
Oh, okay.
And he's ready to yank me out of the course right then. In my squad, in Ranger School, you have no rank, but in my squad, I had a captain who knew this captain from future or past service, and he said to him, "Jim, I don't know, but he's got 3 big bottles with prescription on them, and he's been taking that medication ever since he's been here." The guy said, "Okay, I'm going to go check, and I'll be back tomorrow. And if you're, if I'm taking some kind of, enhancement drugs,
Mm-hmm.
then you're gone." He came back the next day, he looked at me, just shook his head, and the NCO with him said something about Ranger School must be getting awful easy if people with TB can go to it. And so I escaped. I didn't get thrown out. So.
Oh, no. I was just saying the last easy class.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the last one that we only had 1 meal a day. And one of my favorite memories of, which is, I'm being sarcastic, was being the platoon sergeant and getting 28 meals for 32 people. And as John can tell you, there's not a whole lot of food in a little, package of sea rations.
Mm-hmm.
So that day I ended up eating a little can of crackers and a thing of cheese. That was my meal for the day. And we're working probably 16, 18 hours a day. So,
Hey, John.
Smart, they give them 2 meals a day.
John, I wanted to ask you, so the period, pardon me, the period that you went through Ranger School, was it, nowadays it's like more strictly a leadership school. And back then, was it still, I know that they've always emphasized leadership, but it's like back then, was it, more of the advanced infantry / commando school that it had started out as?
Good question. I would say it was probably like 50-50. This was May, June, July 1967. About half the cadre there were people who've been there for years. They were the people that like to yell at you and make you do stupid stuff. And then the other half were all people who had already served in Vietnam. They were trying to teach you what you needed to know
Right.
to go to Vietnam and survive. Those were much more, I won't say advanced, but teaching you infantry tactics, what you needed to do. As an example, we had a class ahead of us that we were out at Camp Darby. You're getting up I remember one time they let us sleep to 4:30 in the morning, and I was so happy that I ran back to the squad to tell them that we were going to sleep in late. But the other cadre got his people up and had them go for a run in the dark. Now there's roots and there's vines and there's all kind of crap. You twist your ankle in Ranger School at that time, you're not going to make it. There's just too much. Our cadre, Captain Millard Peck, who had a tour in Special Forces, had us stand to in the dark, pack up in the dark, and move out tactically, which is something you would do in Vietnam.
Right.
Your chances of hurting yourself were not anywhere near as bad, but it was something you actually would learn something from. You didn't learn anything from running down the trail in the dark and, falling down and twisting your ankles or something. So, those people were very, very beneficial and positive in what I thought. So anyway, then it was back to Vietnam. So,
Yeah, you kind of want those people who have that practical experience in there, not just, I guess, people who are on the theory side only. You want someone coming in with the actual knowledge and having done the job.
yeah, one of our exercises we had to do was make a litter out of ponchos and some branches type of, and carry a wounded man. We only had to carry him maybe 4 or 5 kilometers at the most, and you switched off, so it wasn't the same guy the whole time. I mean, it just beat you into the ground. It was so exhausting.
Yeah.
Because you're always tired anyway. And then the captain set us down and explained to us that one night his unit in the 1st Infantry Division had a contact, and they couldn't get helicopters in it because it was nighttime, and his platoon had to carry several wounded people 3 or 4 kilometers, and just how hard it was. Well, I can testify. It was very, very hard. Teaching you something you would run into.
So you're talking about the Ranger School, and you said that this was kind of mid '67.
Yeah.
You deployed not long after to Vietnam, correct?
Right. I got done, and then I took 30 days leave to recover, get my feet back in shape, and so that would have been the month of July. And then one August, I ended up, towards the end of July, I flew out to California, to Oakland, which was the transfer replacement center. And then I showed up in Vietnam 1 August 67 for my second time in country. So.
Mm-hmm. So can you walk us through maybe when you're deploying to Vietnam, and kind of what your thought process is as you're going there, going to get on the plane? Like, are you thinking, there's a good chance I'm not coming back, or are you not worried about that at all, and you're kind of just looking to get involved as much as possible?
I would say that I did not think about, I may not be coming back, at least at that time. When I got to Oakland, it was kind of funny that I was a staff sergeant, and you fall out in the morning, and there's a big formation, and there were a few of us who were going back that'd been there before. The guy in charge of the formation, we're talking about several hundred people. You go stand back in the formation, and when I get details, you just make sure none of them leave. So I stand in the back, and they send me people, and I put them in line them up, and then they come back and say, "Okay, you go over here and do this." And when they got all done, I'm still standing there, and the NCO says, "I said, what do you want me to do?" He said, "Here, this is my old friend, First Sergeant so and so. He's going back too. Go drink coffee with him and tell war stories." And that's what I did. Go and drink coffee. and then flew there, landed. I guess it was at Benoit, and I was concerned because when I had quote not gone to where I was supposed to go on my initial orders, the personnel NCO, he told me, it looks bad you trying to get out of Vietnam. I said, I'm not trying to get out of Vietnam. I'm trying to go back to my unit. And by the way, where do you think a 23-year-old staff sergeant gets a CID at? I've already been to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm going back. So he cut my orders, diverting me from Special Forces to the unit I didn't want to go to. But when I finally got to Vietnam, I said, look, this is crap. I'm supposed to go to Special Forces. And the clerk said, yeah, Green Beret, where else would you go? It was like big sigh of relief. So again, I had no thoughts that I remember about I might not make it. I was just happy to get back in the game, per se.
Yeah. So can you tell us a bit about Vietnam and some of the deployments and maybe even some of the people that you remember from there, whether it's good or bad?
Oh, I emailed just about daily with several of my friends that I served with. One of them, at 34 years in, came in as a private in the 11th Airborne Division in Germany. He deployed to Lebanon in '58. He retired. He was what they call a distinguished member of the regiment. He retired out of a Tier 1 unit as lieutenant colonel. I talked to him daily. I just got an email today from another friend that we were in the Border Rangers with.
Mm.
All good people. Don told me he wanted to talk. He wanted me to tell about the incident with a 50 caliber machine gun.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted.
Right after I got back to Vietnam in August '67, within 3 or 4 weeks, I got deployed to an A camp called Boom Blick. What the hell? A238. Good camp, good team. It was a hilltop camp. I liked hilltop camps. I didn't like the ones that were flat.
Oh, John, if I can interrupt, if you could just take a minute and explain what the function of an A camp was back then.
An A camp, basically, you train the local indigenous population. In 2 Corps, where we were, was mostly mountain guards. When you went down into 3 Corps, you would get Vietnamese and Cambodians, and again in 4 Corps. I Corps, which was the northernmost Corps, 2 Corps, almost predominantly was mountain guards of the various tribes, Rade, Sendai, Jirai, stuff like that. But I would say basically you were a border camp. I don't know if you could say to deny access into the country, but at least to inhibit the North Vietnamese coming from Cambodia and Laos into South Vietnam. And if nothing else, detecting them when they came in. And camp would run roughly around 500 indigenous personnel, and then your 12-man A team. And you were responsible for training them, equipping them, leading them in the field, taking care of their medical requirements. I guess that's basically it, type deal.
Yeah, thanks.
So anyway, we show up. 3 of us show up at this camp. In the second unit, we would get deployed to various A camps. The things were going on. Some potential for something big going on. So we get out there, and there's a bunker right next to the team house, but it's only about half finished. So I asked, I said, what's going on with that? And they said, well, the man that was working on there, what we would talk about is the patty strength. A camp was a 12-man A team. But just like any other army, somebody's sick, somebody's re-enlisted and is going on leave, somebody's at a school. You very rarely have a complete 12-man camp. But now 3 of us show up. But now that's 3 additional Americans in the camp, which is, you pulled your guard, you did your operations, you went on patrol, you pulled your fair share of what was going on. Anyway, so I said, what's going on with this bunker? And they said, well, the guy that was working there, he's gone someplace. I don't remember where. And that's where we're going to put our 50 calibers. I said, well, I used to teach 50 caliber. So I could do that. I said, okay. And they gave me a squad to complete filling sandbags and fixing the roof of the bunker. And they sent me down to the S4 building, and there were 250 caliber machine guns. They were all cosmolined up. I got about a 10-foot square of white canvas, put a piece of bamboo right between them in the middle, and I detail stripped both of the machine guns and had a squad of mount yards to clean them. Well, when they got done, I want to say it's called the bolt plug. Please forgive me, but it's on the left-hand side of the receiver. But one of the guns was missing. Well, somebody must have lost it. Put the other gun back together, and I had my own headspace and timing gauge. The 50 calibers now, I believe that's all. It's built right into the weapon. In those days, you had a headspace and time the 50 caliber machine gun, and you had a special tool for that. And in 1965, on my first tour, I had gone into a ordnance company downtown Saigon that was in an old taxi company building. In fact, every time I used to watch Taxi on TV, it would make me think about it. And I said, is there any chance I can get a headspace and timing gauge? And they showed me this big box to take all you want. And I took about 15 or 20 of them. I used to give them out at camps that didn't have them. So anyway, we put the weapon back together, and somebody helps me. We take it out. There's a little range just outside the camp with a berm, and there's some 55-gallon drums. And if you ever seen kids with a 22 shooting tin cans, knocking them, that's what we did with that 50 caliber. Only we were shooting 55-gallon drums. Okay, take it up, put it up into the bunker. I go down into the ammo area of the camp, which is metal Conex containers buried, and I bring up a couple thousand rounds, 70 pounds per box, 2 boxes of 100 rounds each. And that evening we're eating, they said, who are you going to get to be your assistant gunner? And I just joking, I turned to a assistant cook who was 13 years old, mount yard, and said, well, he could help me. Well, we had been told that they were going to come, the BC NVA were going to come because it was election time. It had to be in August of 67. And they were going to come and show us they were in charge. Well, good camp, and they would put out 5-man ambushes at various locations on likely areas of approach. And what they would do is they would fire a claymore. Then the strikers, CIDD, civilian irregular defense group guys, still had carbines. They fire the claymore, fire one magazine of full automatic, and fall back. So it was before we went to bed. I don't know, maybe 11 o'clock. We hear a claymore go off.
Mm.
Okay, it's on. So run down into the bunker, and lo and behold, that 13-year-old mount yard shows up. I'm thinking the orientation, but anyway, I'm looking out at the airfield, which is in front of us, going from left to right. Now, I got to be real careful because these ambushes, when they fire, they fall back across the airfield into our area. I don't want to shoot any of our people. So later on, we hear another claymore goes off. And there may have been a third one, but that I can't really remember. But when it was sure that all our people were safely across the airfield, I grabbed the cocking lever on the right-hand side of the receiver of the 50, and I pull back forcefully. Now you have on those Brownings, you've got to cock it twice to get it loaded. So I grab it and I pull it back, and it comes off in my hand. At that time, my heart goes up to my throat. What the hell? If you're familiar with the 50th, it goes on to a threaded lug. Then there's a nut that goes on to secure it. And then there's a cotter pin that goes through that lug so that the nut can't come off. Well, obviously, something's wrong. So I crawl out into the edge of the bunker, and I pick up that 84 pounds like it was nothing. And I bring it back inside, and I'm going, what the hell's going on here? There's no lug, obviously. There's no cotter pin. So I put the handle back on. Because we had so much problem with the increments on our mortars ammunition swelling up, we would get hung rounds in the mortar, and then you have to pick it up and turn it down so the round slides out and you catch it. Well, on an 81 millimeter mortar round, you've got a safety wire, just like on a grenade. You pull that, you put it inside, and then there's what they call a bore riding safety. So once it fires, comes out of the tube, the pressure takes that second bore riding safety out. Well, we had so much problem. I used to keep 2 or 3 of those safety wires in my fatigue shirt pocket. So I put the charging handle back on. I put the safety pin through where the cotter pin would go, but it's very loose. So I have the mount your kit lean against the left side, and I kind of pull at a 45-degree angle, and I get the weapon loaded. Didn't fire around all night. Nothing happens. We find out later that when the claymores went off, again, is at least 2, maybe 3. They had killed the company commander. They had killed the executive officer, and more importantly, they killed the political officer.
Wow.
But now there's no per se leadership of the VC. So they said it was a bad night. They turned around and went home. And I didn't fire around all night. Nobody did.
Well,
So,
I was going to say, I just instantly think, like, when that thing breaks, I'd be looking at the people I'm working with and be like, who's trying to screw me over here? Like, somebody's on the inside. So
exactly, because we once it got light, we knew nothing was happening. Got a cup of coffee. I came back to the bunker, and they had a cement floor, but between the edge of the floor and the wall of the bunker was about a 6-inch strip of mud. And I'm looking around, and over in the corner, I see some footprints of a bata boot. Bata boot was like a high top sneaker that we issued the CIDG. And it's only in that one corner. And I go over there, and I'm looking, and I see something sticking out of the mud, and it's that lug nut that holds that handle on. I never did find the cotter pin. Somebody saw us shooting that 50 caliber and said, we don't want him being effective.
yeah.
So he went in there, pulled the cotter pin, took that lug nut off, and then stepped on it over there. Depending on your camp, you always figure you had 5 to 10% at least VC sympathizers, if not VC. So that guy was real clever.
Yeah.
I was at another camp in 65. You would find rags stuck down in the mortar. And on the 50 there, open up the feed tray. There's a handful of dirt in it. Well, you immediately noticed that. But this guy was sharp, whoever he was. So.
Well, one thing I was thinking too is, like, so you're talking about the ratio of people there. There's 500 indigenous people,
right?
And there's only like 12 Americans.
Yeah, 400 to 500. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that doesn't feel like good odds if somebody decides to, go the opposite direction and start shooting around in the camp. But I guess they must run into that issue even now when, America or Canada's been in Afghanistan and they're training people there. They've had issues with people on the inside. So I guess this is something you can't really get around.
I think actually they had it worse. So, we had Vietnamese Catholics, Vietnamese Buddhists, you had Wahos, you had Caudais that worship everybody, including Victor Hugo. But I don't remember ever having somebody get shot because of something we did against somebody's religion.
Okay.
It wasn't like, somebody in Denmark writes a cartoon about the wife of Muhammad.
Yeah.
And somebody in Afghanistan gets shot because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That didn't happen. So it was worse. But yeah, the last camp I was in and the border rangers, this wasn't so much against us, but there was an organization called FORO, which was Freedom of the Oppressed Liberation something. It was a Mount Yard independence movement, because Mount Yards were not citizens of Vietnam. They lived there, but they weren't really citizens. And in late 1964, they had a revolt in Two Corps, and a bunch of the Vietnamese special forces were shot, or at least held as prisoners. Well, this would have been about September of 1971. We had an intelligence officer come out to camp, and he took us aside and he said, "Hey, full road's coming back. The way you can tell is the second button on his fatigue shirt will be sewn on with red thread." I said, "Okay, thank you." So that day, like I did every day, I walked around to all the companies, and all three Mount Yard company commanders had red thread in that button. So, but again, it wasn't so much against Americans. And again, I don't know what anything. I left shortly thereafter, and I don't think anything actually ever happened. But so it was there. But anyway,
and just for listeners, I guess. So the Montagnards, they lived in the mountains, I believe.
Yeah, the Montagnards were the mountain people, and the Vietnamese used to refer to them, and forgive the pronunciation, was Moi, which basically translates out to savages. So they were so they were looked at. So even though they were fighting against the VC and the NVA, it's like they were still looked down on by the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that the Special Forces got along so well with them, besides the fact they took care of them, was the French never let the Vietnamese into the Central Highlands. I mean, I'm sure they were in the big cities in small amounts, but they really didn't have any interaction. The French did. I have a book by a guy named Rene Rizon, who actually married into a Mount Yard tribe north of Khartoum. But so the French kind of took care of them, and then the Vietnamese came in and screwed all over them, and then the Americans came in and started taking care of them again. It's like, yeah, you're the good guys. We don't like those other ones. Very quick example. I was assigned to go out with 2 Corps Mobile Strike Force out of Pleiku, 3rd Battalion, Captain Moley in charge. And I showed up, and our job was to walk along with the headquarters and provide special intelligence. Well, they were so short of Americans, he said, "Okay, you're first platoon leader." "Yes, sir." So we go down to Huban. We deploy out. We go in we do a helicopter movement, go out into the field. And the first night, I'm sitting with the squad leaders and the Mount Yard platoon leader, and we're eating our evening meal. We have a token Vietnamese LLDB, Vietnamese Special Forces sergeant. And the Mount Yards are talking to him, and they're laughing and joking, and everything seems, copacetic. So we're sleeping in hammocks because of creepy crawlers on the ground. And about 2:00 in the morning, the red chili peppers that I was forced to eat with the Mount Yards tell me that, I need to get up and go do something. When I put my foot down, I step on the biggest python that you could ever imagine. At least that's what I thought. It wasn't. It was the leg of that Vietnamese sergeant. Even though he seemed to get along good with the Mount Yards, he would rather sleep underneath me as possibly a little more insurance that nothing would happen to him during the night.
Yeah.
Can you imagine going to the field with that?
It's funny. Yeah. The relationships. Did you ever have any run-ins with any kind of predators out there, or even some of the reptiles?
Never had a problem with snakes. We did have a tiger try to come into our perimeter one night, and he set off a mechanical ambush with a claymore, which killed him. He was definitely stalking us.
Wow.
Then one other time we were we were on an old 4th Division fire base, again, a hill, doing rocket interdiction. They were shooting rockets into Pleiku, and we were running patrols out of there. And the Mountain Yards had conducted their most successful ambush. They killed 13 VC water buffaloes. And they tore down the RPG screens, the old cyclone fence, and they jerked all this meat. I went out to replace a guy named Joe Phillips who got bit by a rat. He had to go in and get the 13 shots in the stomach.
Oh.
And there were bunkers there. They were up maybe 3 feet into the ground, and then they had ammunition cases full with dirt, and then a roof. And I asked the people I was with, I said, "We don't have any of that meat in here, do we?" "No, we don't." Well, they lied. I woke up at about 2:00, and there were so many rats in there, they had MPs directing traffic. So I slept on the roof. You could hear at least 2, if not 3 tigers down at the base of this hill, growling, because they could smell the meat, all the meat, and the people. They got used to eating dead. They didn't have to chase deer and game because there were so many dead people around. They eat.
Mm-hmm.
So they, when the Mountain Yards walk around, his hair standing straight up, it's a bad time. They never did try to come up to the hill, but we would shoot M79s down just to keep them honest. So that's the only thing that I can remember was tigers. And again, that one tiger was definitely stalking us. And this was right after I had read about some poor Marine up in High Corps in a bunker, in a foxhole. And tigers are incredibly quiet. This thing had come in, bit him in the shoulder, and was dragging him off. And he never saw it till it got him. And the only thing he could think of is he pulled himself up and he bit the tiger on the nose as hard as he could, and the thing dropped him.
Wow.
Otherwise, he'd have been a meal. In fact, there's a video on YouTube, I think it's called like Strange Patrol at the Rock Pile. It's about some poor Marine recon guy, and he does get killed by a tiger.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh, for the viewers, the M79 that they were talking about shooting at the tigers, that launches 40 millimeter grenades.
I wouldn't be shooting it with small caliber.
No.
Yeah, well, Claymore's did a job. I had another friend that I went to Ranger School with. He came from the 7th Special Forces, and I ran into him in Pleiku, and he was in SOG. He was in Command and Control Central up in just north of us. And I said, "How's it going?" He said, "Not so good." He said, I've been wounded twice and stepped on by an elephant once."
Oh.
What? And we had wild elephants there, and apparently they were out moving very quietly, and it was the rainy season, so it was very muddy. And they spooked a small herd of elephants, and one of them stepped on them and actually pushed him into the mud. He pushed him in so bad that they had a real hard time getting him out.
Holy smokes.
The rest of of course, you're trying to be quiet because you're behind the lines. And I told him he needed to find another job. He did. He got killed about a month later. So we had elephants. In fact, I've got a photo of us using an elephant to deploy a PRD-1 direction finding instrument. It was like a square box, quite big. And then we used an elephant to carry it. That was down at Bandon, another camp. In fact, that's the camp where I don't know if you've ever seen the movie where I think it's Danny Glover and the Dumbo drop. They drop an elephant out of a plane.
Oh, yeah.
Which was not true. What they did was they had to give the elephant a tranquilizer so he could walk onto the back of a C-130, go to sleep, and not wake up till they got where they were going. So obviously, if he woke up in flight, that'd not be good. And that was called Operation Baroom because this tranquilizer is making an elephant fart. When an elephant farts inside of an enclosed building, it's very traumatic. And if you see pictures of it, everybody's wearing a gas mask on the airplane.
This sounds like just some almost like a fantasy world. Like Vietnam just sounds like some crazy far off fantasy novel. Just the amount of animals and things that are going on. I think of it like compared to North America, like, well, I don't know, you worry about a bear, maybe. Like there's not
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
ton, unless you're like out in the desert, maybe you come across a snake or something, but you go over there and it's like everything's trying to kill you outside of the people. In the middle of you did your one tour from 67 to 68. You did a second one in Vietnam from 71 to 2, but you got married in between there.
Yeah, I also did 6 months, and I did 6 months in 65.
Your initial.
Then I did a year 67, 68. Then I did 6 months in 69, and then I got married, and I went back in January of 71 to January 72.
Can you talk a bit about just getting married in kind of in the middle of all these deployments and how that kind of happened? And then, did the wife worry was that another person worrying about you going away at that time?
Well, again, my wife was from Okinawa, and I have no idea what it's like now, but in those days, you started off with a Shahoki Tohan, I think it is. You had to get a copy of the family record. You had to have it translated by a certified translator. Then she had to have a background investigation. And then you had to go to a legal briefing where they explained her rights to her. And then you had to go through you got married. Then you had to go to the American consulate, get registered. Same that when my son was born there, you had to go to the consulate, record of birth, because being an American citizen, he's American citizen because he's born, his father was American. It was quite a convoluted process because I kept being deployed. I had to start over 2 or 3 times. Finally, in 1970, when I was home, I was back in Okinawa for an extended period of time. I got the pride. I did all typing myself, and then ironically, I never called anybody. I kept being told, call this guy, he'll do this. Call this guy. And I didn't do anything, and my paperwork was done in about 2.5, maybe 3 months, faster than anybody else's, because I didn't bug anybody. Which I think these people got tired of people calling down saying, "Can you do me first?" I feel, and then they, they put them on the bottom of the list. But it was quite a convoluted process. Get it done.
And they lived in Japan, so they're all in Okinawa, the family, and you're mainly deploying out of there, or coming back to work from there.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
And also in 69, I went down. We did an exercise in the Philippines. So, way up in Luzon, a place called Ichage, way up in Isabela Province, which is way north of Manila. Which that was interesting in that we were based on what was an old Japanese fort, which was basically all that was left was a trench line. We put up a GP medium tent, and we worked out of that. But we ended up having to stop the operation early because in those days it was the Hucks, which was the Huckamawaka, some Ligong. They were the communist guerrillas in the Philippines. Now it's the NPA, the New People's Army. But apparently there'd been a fight between the conventional, the good guy Filipinos and the bad guy Filipinos. And they killed a bunch of the Hucks. So the Hucks were going to get back. So we ended up ending the exercise about a week, 10 days early, and coming back to Clark Air Force Base, and then deploying back to Okinawa. But that was also just we had a 3/4 truck with a generator trailer. We were driving down to go back to Clark, and the engine started making some really bad noises. So we stopped, and a gooseneck came by, and we gave them the generator trailer. And we waited because they said a tow truck was coming, which never did show up. So we turned around, basically coasted back down this hill into a local town where they had what they called a quick QWIK repair shop, and we had worked with them up in the Chaggy, and they had lathes, they could do all sorts of stuff. And I talked to the guy. I said, "Excuse me, sir, I wonder if you could take a look at our truck." And he kind of acted like he didn't hear me. So I said again, "Excuse me, sir, I wonder if you could take a look at our truck." He heard me. He was just ignoring me. He did not want to be seen talking to an American,
Okay.
which was not a good sign. So we turned around, the Hawaiian guy, James A. Smith III, and I. We had M16s with ammunition. We put the truck in 4-wheel drive, and we drove back up the hill, got all the way to the top, and there was a little bus station stop where you could get Cokes and stuff. And right next to it was a Filipino constabulary base that looked like an A camp in Vietnam. Barbed wire around it, and so forth. And they were over there having a Coke, and we had a Coke too. And about 5 o'clock, they looked at their watches. They go back. They close the barbed wire gate. I see them checking their machine guns. I'm going, we don't want to be here. This is, I'm getting ready to go over there and say, can we stay with you? And a guy named Major Joseph come by in a Jeep, because we didn't know where we were going. We didn't have a map or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what are you doing? I said, well, look, this. He said, do you think you can drive it? I said, well, we'll try. And just keep it another 20 miles an hour. And we were able to get back to Clark Air Force Base. Because, again, it was not a good place for us to be at night, even though we were armed. 2 guys don't stand a whole lot of chance against 15, 20, 30 or more guys.
Nope. Yeah. One of the things I want to ask you about, just before we move too far from the some of the deployments to Vietnam, was when you were there and you're out on your deployment, like, what are some of the missions that you're a part of? Like, are you mainly protecting force, or are you going out and looking for the opposition, or are you, like, what is your function, and what are some of the missions that you were a part of there?
Again, it varies a little bit of each. If you went to, like I said, when I worked out of Pleiku, we were co-located with a signal intelligence unit, a large signal intelligence unit on what they call Engineer Hill, which was just north of Pleiku. We had our own intercept sites out on the border camps, which, because of where they were, we were told at one time that 60% of what we collected was unduplicated by any other source. And that's basically because we were close to places like the B3 front, which is where Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam all meet.
Okay.
The NVA had a major headquarters there. Then if you went out to an A camp, you were expected to, again, you pulled your guard, you pulled your radio watch, you did patrols. When I went out with my force, I ended up being a patrol leader. When I got sent up to attach to then Project Delta, I worked with their S2 NCO at our at base camp at Mylock. And I would, there was a guy named Major Aiken, good guy. He would send me over to the Marine Combat Support Base Vandergrift, and I would liaison with their intelligence folks. Then he sent me down to the Combat Intelligence Center in Dong Hai, which was the big Marine base. And we would, with them, because the Marine Corps general up there, Lieutenant General Cushman, loved Project Delta. And every time he could, he would request them to come up and run in country. Delta ran in country from the border in. SOG ran on the border out into Laos and Cambodia. Mm-hmm. And Project Delta was the premier in-country reconnaissance force.
Okay.
You had recon teams. You had the 81st Airborne Ranger battalion, which was Vietnamese. You had bomb damage assessment. You had road runners who would go out and they would wear the enemy uniform at that area.
Hmm.
In fact, we had a Marine Corps convoy come out to our location, and the Marines got 2 open cans of beer a day if they were lucky. We had a cooler, and the convoy came out and said, "You guys want a cold beer?" Okay. Well, right next to us where the helicopters landed, and the guy who went out to recover this Roadrunner team forgot to take the Pontus with him. So this Huey lands, 50 meters away from where these Marines are, and 4 NVA get out. They've got steel helmets, NVA uniforms, NVA rucksacks, and AK-47s, and they run over and they jump into the back of a 3-quarter, and somebody drops a flap. And these Marines go, hey, NVA. How many beers have you had, Sergeant? No, I don't know about NBA. But so there, I just worked with it. So a little, it depended on where you were and what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
When I got transferred to 4 Corps Rangers, they closed out the enlisted slots in 2 Corps. I ended up going down to 4 Corps, and I ended at a place called Muckwa. And there I flew backseat in CH-47s when we were moving the Rangers from one camp to another. And theoretically, I was supposed to control the Rangers when they got on board, and also make sure that the pilots went to where they were supposed to go. And I didn't think I would have to do that, but my very first flight, I know, Nathan, are you familiar? Can you read a map? I mean, you can look at a map and tell what's going on the ground.
I can read like a road map. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell elevation of things or any of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in 4 Corps, what you look at on the map is exactly what's on the ground because it's all flat until you get up to the Southern Mountains. And where we were in Muckwa back in like 1886, the French had come in and built all these canals, and one was called the wagon wheel because it was circular.
Mm-hmm.
And then off that was spokes going out these various areas. So I'm flying back seat, and I'm listening to the pilot. We're going up to a place called Kai Kai, which I knew was a triangular camp. I'd never been there before. I knew it was on the east side of the canal. And I'm listening to the pilot saying, "Yeah, I've been up here before. There it is up there." And he points out to the west, and there's a rectangular camp. Well, that wasn't it. And I kind of tapped him on the shoulder and pointed straight ahead. In about 3 or 4 more minutes, we fly in, and there's this triangular camp, which is Kai Kai. I couldn't understand how they couldn't navigate because it was maybe it was just that particular crew.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So depending on where you were, is what you did. So
Okay.
a little bit of everything.
One of the highlights that you had in your bio that's I'm kind of curious about is, so you finish up with Vietnam, and that says you later joined a scuba team. They're now known as the Combat Dive Team. So is this part of the Navy SEALs, or is this just something separate?
No, ironically though, I did go. My scuba school was. I went to a ship's divers course at Groton, Connecticut, which is the new London Sea Base. Because comic subs, at least at that time, whenever they leave a foreign port, are required to have divers that go out and check the bottom of the hull of the sub to make sure there's nothing, no tracking devices or anything like that have been put on, type deal.
Mm-hmm.
But no, scuba teams have been around in Special Forces ever since Special Forces has been around, type deal.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah, like from 1959.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, in fact, one of the comments I think I sent the poster to John was the difference between Navy SEALs and combat divers is they do the same job except combat divers don't have hair gel. So,
Yeah.
a little inner service rivalry there.
So, well, that's like sometimes they make fun of our tactical teams. They always say they're doing their hair. That's why they take forever to get to a scene. So, But you throughout your career, like you've been all over the place. You had the bio was pretty impressive. So after Vietnam, you leave there, you deploy to several places. You're in Asia a few more times, but you also go to Europe, do a few exercises there. Do you want to tell us a bit about some of those different uh, jobs or functions that you've been a part of?
In the 10th Special Forces Group, after Vietnam, uh, money was extremely tight. I look at the stuff that everybody has now. It's just amazing. I'm glad they've got it. But as a team sergeant, my team gear would fit in a double wall locker. And that consisted of a couple sets of radios, a few little nuclear, biological, chemical detection things, 12 angle head plastic flashlights. We were supposed to have 12 compasses, and we couldn't get them because they just wouldn't buy them. So I went down to the PX and bought 4 or 5 real cheap silver plastic compasses. So at least everybody on the team would have a compass of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Depending where you were, just about everybody at one time or another would go to the exercise flintlock, which was normally held in Germany. We also went to Italy. Mafoni, I think was.
Yeah,
John was on one of those exercises. Yeah. And I got to go in 78. Really wasn't a Mafoni. We were working with the Italian Incasuris. They're kind of special forces. We did scuba training and we did kayak training there. And then I went back in 84. Our whole company went back. That was a Mafoni. But so with Italy, part of my team went to the Danish Scout Swim School. The other 4 of us we were also a SATM team. We got to do a nuclear surety inspection, which is a real pain in the neck.
And for the listeners, the SATM was the Special Atomic Demolition Munition, otherwise known as the backpack nuke.
Yeah,
That's a pretty cool name.
And we got tested. Yeah, we got tested 4 times a year, and the saying was, for those of you who have never failed an NSI, life tastes a lot like death. You failed an NSI, it was not a good thing. So I did that for 5 years. Bet your stripes on a test. So it's like 20 of those, and we were stuck with it. We were told initially that we would have that mission for 18 months, and then the battalion commander told us, well, they tell me we have to have an amphibious capability with that SATM, so you're stuck with it. So
okay.
You're stuck with it. But a friend of mine went on the other scuba team. They went to the Dutch Commando School. I know John's team went to the Belgian Commando School. We had people go to the Italian Mountain School. I believe they also went to the German Mountain School. Because at that time, we had 1 battalion who was stationed in Bad Tolz, Germany, and then 2nd and 3rd Battalion at that time were at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. Now they're at Fort Carson, Colorado. So a lot of time spent in the Black Forest on exercise. The only time I was in Germany where I wasn't in the Black Forest was 1984. 2 teams went over to do mountain climbing, and I was command and control, and I put 3,000 kilometers on a step van. I saw more of Germany outside the Black Forest than I'd ever seen on all the other exercises. John was stationed there for a while, so he got to see a lot of it, but I certainly did. So.
And then and then every year at Devens, we could count on going to the Pennsylvania exercise, which was an annual guerrilla warfare exercise. And then every winter we would do what was originally called winter warfare, where basically the whole group would go out and we would do downhill and cross country ski training and survival and fighting in the snow.
For Larsen, I was going to ask, just for I wanted to get your perspective on, working with all these different militaries from all these different countries. What are some of the good and some of the bad that you've seen there? And John Simpson there is laughing. So it's just some of the good and the bad that you've seen, and maybe give us a bit of perspective on how other people are training or what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong around the world.
Well, this is pretty broad brush, but I would say that most of the European armies I got to work with, especially Germany, Italy, the British and Brunei, they all did pretty well, some better than others. And I attribute that they all had an NCO corps, non-commissioned officer corps. Most of the organizations we work with in Asia, an NCO was just a higher paid private. We would run training where we would train NCOs and they would do a good job. And as soon as they got back into their unit, if it wasn't a lieutenant there, they did not want to make a decision. That was pretty much the Thais, the Koreans, Vietnamese, and there's a very distinct separation between officers and the rest of the Army type deal. So I thought there was so much potential in Asia for these units, and we had some really good people, and it was just kind of heartbreaking to see that they would go back and know things would be right back to normal, that they would not be able to make a decision. It had to be from so off.
Is that for like the special forces units, or is that for just in general the Army?
I would say in general, maybe not so much for their special operations forces, but definitely for the rest of the military. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things I want to make sure we get in here, we got maybe 20 minutes or so left, is talking just about kind of as you come up to retirement and what that decision looked like, and how did that come about? What kind of made you decide 30 years is the right time to go, or was that your decision? I don't know if it was medical or not, but what can you talk a bit about retirement and what that looked like for you?
Well, I retired at 30 years because it was mandatory. I had no option.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
would have stayed longer, but yeah, 30 years. 30 years or 55, age 55, and you're out. I wasn't 55, but in fact, I was very disappointed. My company commander at Fort Lewis, 1st Special Forces, had already been sent to the First Gulf War. The 5th Special Forces was going, and the commander, Colonel Krause, had been 3rd Battalion commander, and the 10th Group, I'd worked for him. His executive officer, Colonel Feistheimer, had been my company commander, and I wanted to go play. And I called the Department of the Army and said, hey, look, send me in, coach. And Sergeant Major Smith at Personnel told me, we are just waiting for the president to sign off on no retirements, et cetera, and then you can play. And I came in, he said, call me tomorrow. And I called him the next morning, and he said, change to, he's not going to sign it. Have a nice life. And I retired about 2 days later.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, I went to school for a while. Again, I wrote articles.
Are you in the U.S. at this time? Like, did you move back to the U.S. right away, or are you in Okinawa?
No. In 1988, we came back from Okinawa to Fort Lewis. And my wife liked it here. There was a bunch of our friends that lived in the area. There was a very strong Okinawan community here. So she was happy here. We liked it here. So
okay.
Certainly didn't want to go back to live in New Jersey or North Carolina. So anyway, we stayed here. I tried working 911 call receiver. 12 hours in a windowless room was not for me. I did that for about 4 months. They had a lot of problems. I will say this. In that hiring period, they hired 16 of us. 14 of us quit. give you an indication. And this was a very well-paid job.
Really?
Very good medical benefits. Very good, the best retirement plan in the state. It just was not something I wanted to do. And then, fortunately, John called me and said, "Hey, we're doing this job here." At that time, we were working for, I guess it was Chrysler Motors, right, John?
Jeep, Chrysler Jeep.
Yeah. And we did, basically, we had 2 tents. One was for like car camping and one was for backpack camping. And we would go to various locations, and Chrysler would come in and you could drive Chrysler products or Jeep products. No sales, just come on in. And in the meantime, when you weren't doing that, they had things to do like come over and look at our tent. We did that for a while. And then the company I worked for also sold laser rangefinders. The agency had bought a couple, and the Secret Service had bought some, and they had worked with Rockwell, and they had developed a system where you could hook the the laser rangefinder to a military GPS, and it would give you the location of what you're looking at. Very good location, within like a meter, supposedly.
Oh, really?
Well, when Operation Anaconda happened, the Canadian forces already had those. And I guess the Army said, "Why don't we have them? Because you'd never bought them." So then, actually, we got the Marine Corps contract first. Well, that's when I got to go to Afghanistan to instruct the Rakazan, the 3rd Brigade of the 101st Airborne Air Mobile in Kandahar. And we brought in 24 systems, trained them, and then turned the systems over to them. And after that, got to go to Switzerland 3 times for the company. All over the United States. We went back to Okinawa to train the Marines.
When you were in Kandahar, is that where you ended up meeting with the PPCLI members?
Yeah. Corporal McKinnon's the only guy I remember his name. And that's because after we got back, they would come down at night and drink coffee with us. And, I actually have a photo of the rifle they used to make that, at that time, the longest shot, 2,634 meters, something like that. After we came back to the United States, we went to the Association of the United States Army, which is a big trade show in Washington. And I'm walking around there, and who's there at the Canadian booth? But Master Corporal McKinnon. And, "Hey, what are you doing here? What are you doing here?" type thing. So, yeah, they would come down at night and drink coffee. And in fact, we were supposed to go out with them on a training exercise, basically just for the hell of it type deal. And it was going to be a night exercise. And at the last moment, their commander decided, no, he didn't want us to do that. And that was the night, unfortunately, that the F-16s dropped the bombs and killed the 4 Canadians and wounded 8 more, which still pisses me off.
One of the guys, there's a guy at our work who was injured in friendly fire. So, and now there's one of them who's a police officer.
And he was there that night?
I'd have to double check. He doesn't talk too much about it, but I'll have to find out if that was the one.
Yeah. As John can tell you, there's no such thing as friendly fire. It all hurts or it all kills you type deal. So
no, it's a small world. So just some of the connections, just like our last guest that we were talking with there, John Simpson here. We were chatting with the last person we were recording with, and just it was like 3 or 4 times. They're somewhere else in the world, and they come across just another person that they're like, oh, how do I find you out of whatever the amount of the population, 6 billion people in the planet, but I come across you right now.
But it's a relatively small community nowadays of people who fight their wars. So.
This was what I thought it was funny at the time, but we were deploying to Thailand from here, from Washington, and we overnighted in Hawaii. And of course, some of the younger guys went downtown. Well, prior to that, we had 4 guys from B Squadron, 22nd SAS, from Britain come over to go on an exercise with us in Montana. Well, these guys, the fellows in my unit, go into a bar, and lo and behold, there's those 4 Brits.
Mm-hmm.
They apparently are on their way to Brunei. Well, the SAS guys don't see my guys. So one of them says, gets a waitress and says, come here, go give those guys 4 beers and tell them this is for the brave lads of B Squadron 22nd SAS. So they go over. She goes over. They look at her and they get up and they leave. How does who knows? And they never did see my guys. But yeah, the small world. How you run into somebody that like that. Well, when I went to the jungle warfare school in Brunei, the helicopter pilot that flew us had started out. He was a Centurion tank driver, and I asked him, "How'd you get to be a pilot?" He said, "Well, we were in Germany, and it was a typical rainy, nasty, cold day, and this small helicopter landed and gave us a message." And I said, "No, I'd probably like to do that." Well, we trained with them in there. Then later, we went down to Hong Kong to work with their special duties unit, their SWAT team. And lo and behold, who's flying for our operation? That same pilot. So
Wow.
I get over to their warrant officer and sergeant's mess, and I already got a friend there. So again, small world. But as John said, it's kind of a small community. So, when people start saying, "Yeah, I did this, this, and this, and I know this, and I'm black ops and so forth," it's very easy to find out if he is or not. It is a small community. So
True. I just want to, as we're coming up to the end of the time here, I just want to ask, what are you doing nowadays? Are you fully retired? Are you partially retired?
Yeah.
Fully retired?
My wife died in 2012, and I was getting ready to retire. And I talked to my boss and said, "Look, if you want me, I'll stay a little longer." And I stayed about 2015, and then I still get emails from them to proofread proposals and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm fully retired as of about 2015.
John, are you still writing for knife magazines?
No, the editor, the publisher, he stopped the whole business back, I guess, in 2014.
Oh, okay.
So, typical business deal. Walked in one day in New York City and told everybody on a Thursday, "Have all your stuff out here by Friday by 6:00. That I'm closing the business." And that was all the alert they got. So,
wow.
Holy.
Didn't bother me because I work from home. So,
Well, that kind of brings us up to the end of the time. Is there anything that you think we missed, either one of you, or that we should make sure we cover? I think we covered a lot of ground here. Yeah.
John knows this guy. I'm sitting here and I looked it up. One of the things that on the Flintlock was in April of '82, we went in as the B team. The B team is your company headquarters. You have 6 teams underneath that. We went into Germany first. We were going to do the area survey. Then one man would go back to England and brief the 4 A teams that were coming in. And that was a guy named Cliff Strickland, who was killed in a star extraction, the Fulton recovery. Yep. John just talked to me just recently about him. I think he's one of 3 people who died during the.
Yeah, he was the last. He was the last human pickup on a star extraction, and also the last one to die. And so basically, the system got retired after that for live pickup. For those of you not familiar with it, you can actually see it in operation in the 1968 John Wayne movie, The Green Berets, where they have the captured colonel sitting there in a padded suit and a nylon line connected to a helium balloon, and a cargo plane comes by with a fork on the nose, and it drives into the line, there's a latching mechanism, a winding mechanism, and a cutting mechanism. And what happens is they fly off, the guy is lifted up into the air, and then he's winched into a position where he can be hooked into the back of the plane. And my friend Cliff, he was actually he was a member of my team. He was the intel sergeant on my A team, and Vietnam veteran, and had just had a daughter, and he his wife had just given birth to his son, and basically it was it was during a flintlock in 1982, and he was working for the B team, and the scenario was that he was going to carry a message back to the higher headquarters, and basically he got picked up, lifted 200 feet into the air. The mechanism failed, and he fell straight down.
Wow.
Yeah. The operation had been canceled. Then at the last moment was put on to impress some undersecretary of defense. I have photos. Mike Armstrong standing there holding the cord, the nylon cord. Cliff in the suit, sitting down, smiling, and in the background, against the tree line, you can see a couple people in trench coats. So they were. I hope they were impressed because, like John said, when the clamp portion did not work, so the line eventually just played all out. If you're secured, another friend of ours, Steve Ferris, was a liaison to the first SOS when I saw him down at Eglin. There's at least one electric winch to pull you in, maybe two. I can't remember. But there's also a hand crank winch system that you can crank and bring them in. And if that all fails, you could actually hook a parachute to the cord, cut the cord, and you might be 100 feet below that. But you could do it. But if it doesn't catch, then there's your toast.
That's it.
And I was told many years later that the operation before that, they had to beat the clamp open with a hammer. And according to the Air Force, it was the Army's responsibility to maintain the system. And as I've told many people, when's the last time you saw the Air Force let the Army climb around underneath one of their planes doing anything? So, but it was a real tragedy. And John said he had 2 kids, and good guy, good NCO.
Yeah,
still pisses me off though.
Yeah. I saw
in that same company. In 3 years, we had 3 people killed in training. A guy named Newbie got killed up in a night combat equipment halo drop Camp Drum. We had Cliff, and then I had a guy named Andrew Stay got killed in a selection course for a Tier 1 unit.
Yeah, and Andy Stay, and Andy Stay was also off of my detachment, my A team as well. So it, basically it, but it was, it was an interesting ride when I first met John. But you left out one of the most important highlights of we didn't have any money back before SF was, back when SF wasn't cool. We had these. You didn't mention the rifles in the arms room.
The XM16E ones.
Yeah. So basically, at the time, because I got there, I got to 10th Group. I met John in 1978, and when we got to so basically, when I got issued my M16, everybody in the Army had an M16A1. And when I got to the 10th Special Forces Group out of Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and they issue you your rifle, stamped on the side was XM16E1. And it It still had a the gun wonks in the audience will get this, but it still had a chrome bolt on the rifle. So basically, all of the product improvements that made an M16A1 hadn't been applied to these. It was this little pocket in time where basically time hadn't advanced. Yeah, I mean they had they had the old flash suppressor, they had the old sling swivel, they had the old, yeah, it was just ridiculous. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. My serial number was 100388. But I must say I kept that rifle for 8 years. When I made Sergeant Major and I left the A team, I went down to battalion and had them transfer that rifle to the B team because it never failed me. I swam with it. I shot it till the gas tube glowed orange. But like John said, Special Forces got the very first issue of those rifles, and we still had them. My part of my team had to go represent 10th Group at the First Army marksmanship competition, and people were coming over looking at, is that something new? We've never seen rifles like this. They all had the brand new ones, and we still had the old ones. So.
Yeah, but it's very difficult, especially nowadays with, between, defense budgets and the prestige of Special Forces and everything. But it's like the best example of what it was like back then when John and I were serving together was my team went into isolation, and basically this is where a team is sequestered for mission planning, and you receive intelligence and you supply requests. And 1 week we got placed into isolation on Fort Devens to provide. Basically, we were a live A team to task the battalion staff to do their functions for mission planning. So we get in there, and they bring in the food, and we're eating off of paper plates, and we toss them in the trash, and then 10 minutes later, there's this somebody, a staffer comes in. First we were told, now look, for this week, you guys are the hottest thing on post. Okay, so you tell us what you need. We're gonna send you stuff. You do your planning, and then you task the intel guys to come up with this, and you task the logistics guys to come up with this, and all well and good. So we have our first meal there, and then it was like somebody comes in a panic going, hey, you guys got to fish the paper plates out of the trash bag because we weren't able to buy any more paper plates.
Really?
So you have to, yeah. So you have to reuse your paper plates for the next couple of days.
Jeez.
And to me,
unbelievable.
So to me, that's the special and Special Forces. Okay, that's why for me it's always been about the training and the people, and because as far as the shiny gear and everything else, that's like I came from the Special Forces where we had to wash off our paper plates and use them again after fishing them out of the trash. And
that's awesome story.
That was Special Forces under Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're right at the end of our time here. I want to say thanks for coming on the show there to both you Johns, but Mr. Larsen, I think it was great to learn from you and hear your story. So yeah, I just want to say thanks. And if you just hang on the line for a second, I'll say bye offline. But yeah, appreciate you coming on here.
You're more than welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you.